Hi. Our next step that I want to help you get started with is how to add the background. The background, we are going to use a variety of lines, and while we're working, we want to use our paper straight edge or our ruler straight edge. As we're creating the background, we also want to think about how we can kind of not just fill the space, but fill the space in an interesting way. So here I have started my first line at an intersection where two of my circle shapes come together, and I'm going to start the first one lining up the ruler from the beginning so that all the lines start from the same point or the same intersection, and spacing them out like a fan. Here I kind of run into a little bit of the circle, so I will come in here and fill this space. As I'm filling this space, it's important that my ruler is parallel so the lines go the same direction, and you might notice that the spacing between the lines is different. Okay, so here these are closer together and these are farther apart, and I have a little space here that is a little bit too big, so I will continue that so I'm filling the entire shape. For my next area, I'm going to come back to the same intersection point and create a line that's going to be a little different. I don't necessarily want to make a zigzag line, but I draw the space first, and then again using the straight edge. I don't want to just use the same exact pattern for the whole design. So now I'm copying the same line, keeping the spacing parallel. So every time I come back, I'm lining up the ruler, sliding it over, and completing the line all the way till it touches the next shape. Okay? And it's important that the lines match up. I don't want a zigzag. That was a little awkward, so let's see if it works better this way. If my lines don't touch, then I have to come back and connect them until that space is filled up. So I'm going all the way to the edge of the paper, and here this space looks too big, so that line needs to be a little longer. So every time when I'm filling a section, I have to look and see how the pattern is evolving. This is going to get kind of boring if it's all the same. So for right now, I'm going to leave that. I might come back and do a section another way. All right. So now I'm going to jump over here to this other edge, and keeping my ruler parallel, and a nice little tip is to start at one edge to back the ruler up, and as I'm making my lines, I think on this one I'm going to have the lines expand, so the spaces are going to get a little bit wider as the lines move to the edge of the paper. And you'll notice I'm not starting at the outside edge, I'm starting at the intersection and working my way out. So I want to visualize the space before. I decided to make them wider, so I'm going to back up the ruler, match up the ruler edge to the line, and I move to the edge of the paper. Okay? Resist the temptation to fill in the gaps. So keep using your ruler. If you have a little overshoot, erase that. And I think I will take this one all the way off the edge of the paper rather than introducing something new. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill this space. And there's one more little one there. Keeping in mind I'm having my spaces get larger, I have to make sure that my spaces don't get smaller. Now you might decide you want to go smaller, bigger, smaller. Okay, so there we go. And we work our way around the page. All right. I'm going to start one more area here, and then at the beginning of the video you saw a different example, and I have one more using line a little bit differently.
You're going to explain it then?
Yes. So we'll start one more here. And so you'll notice this one is more like a regular zigzag, and this one the line bends differently. So we want it to be not all the same everywhere. And let's go a narrow, very narrow bands. When we're doing narrow bands, it works well to think in terms of, just like we had 3 circles or 5 circles, it works well to think in terms of, let's have 5 lines, let's have 7 lines. So an odd number of lines or shapes is always a little bit more interesting visually than having an even number. Okay, so right now I have 3, and maybe that's all I'm going to have. If that is too small as I'm building the other shapes, then I might decide to add more lines. So I want to think about having a small group of shapes, a medium group of shapes, and a large group of shapes. Okay, so this area is small. This area right now, these are kind of the same size. So perhaps I will come back, and instead of doing something different here, if we get too many different things going, it's kind of chaotic. They're still kind of similar in size. So let's see what happens if we add a few more lines. Okay, so now this is a little bit larger and they're less the same. Okay, let's take a quick look at this example. Okay, this one is more complete. So here was the first line right here. Okay, starting at the intersection. So then these lines were added, moving close together towards the sphere or the circle shape. Then these lines were added out here. So it repeats in a small way. This next shape, this was the first line.
No, this one was.
On the next shape, this one was the first line, this zigzag. And it started small, and the lines expand as the shape moves out. Okay, starting the other way, it still uses a kind of a bent line, but the lines are going a different direction, and they're narrow, and they're pretty consistent. In this background space, we don't want to leave the background empty, so all the lines are vertical and they come on either side here. So it's creating that, filling that background shape. In this next section here, the first line, let's go over here. The next line was at this intersection, so here was the first shape, and then the lines were built out. This was the next line coming from that intersection, and then parallel lines were added. This shape was the next line. This bent line was next, and again, it's a smaller area that repeats, and this goes all the way to the edge. So it provides some variety between this and this area. Coming from that same point, these lines were added, and the section is filled so that it's going underneath and coming out. So this lines up, okay? In this section, the first line comes from here, from this intersection right here, and then it was time for a more narrow spacing, so that went out to the edge and also was built up to touch the sphere, and you'll notice, so it completes that zigzag there. Down here at the bottom, this was the first line, and then it fans out from the same point all the way to the edge, and these lines go underneath behind the circle. Okay, so having variety is important. Starting from the intersection is important. So these were those. This one is more finished. This one I showed you how to start. Okay, this next one, the lines are a little bit different. So if we look at this one, you'll notice right here, starting at the edge of the circle, this was the first line here, and there are 3 or 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is an even number. So this kind of stripe operates and moves through 4 lines kind of equally spaced, so that was the first line. In the second section, this was the next line, and it bent. So what could I do with changing the line direction? And then as I moved to the edge of the paper, there was no place to have the zigzag, so it becomes straight and it comes up behind. So this pattern kind of continues here. This way, this was the next line starting here at the intersection. These lines are going horizontal, and I've got one line that jumped in here that doesn't need to be there. So, and it's going underneath. Okay, and then this one changes direction again, and it comes through and follows onto the other side and comes, the spacing is pretty even. So in this one, there probably is not enough variety in the width of the line, the spacing. This one has a much better variety. You've got larger spaces, medium spaces, and small spaces. So we want to have variety of line direction and line shape.